This episode is brought to you by Bound Hat Company. Discover Bound Hat Company, where high-quality hats meet a greater purpose. Each hat is designed not only for style, but also to give back, with proceeds supporting charities like the PTSD Foundation of America. Whether for the outdoors or everyday wear, Bound Hat Company has the perfect hat for any occasion. Shop now at www.boundhatco.com and join the movement to support veterans and meaningful causes. Bound Hat Co. Style that makes a difference.
The following podcast discusses sensitive topics. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know is struggling, call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline for 24/7 confidential support.
Welcome to Survival in the Trenches, Life Beyond Loss, a podcast where we share the powerful stories of those who have faced extraordinary loss and found the strength to push forward and triumph. These are real journeys of resilience, courage, and hope. Join us as we uncover what it means to rise above, even in the darkest of times. Hello and welcome to Survival in the Trenches. My name is Kelly Chandler and I will be your host today. We are very honored to sit down with Gina Schuster to talk about her life beyond loss. Welcome, Gina, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. It's an honor. I appreciate the opportunity.
So today we're going to talk about your husband, Corey. Mm-hmm. And before we get into those details, I wanted to kind of step back in time to figure out and learn more about you and your childhood, where you grew up, what you wanted to be when you grew up, type of a thing.
Yeah.
So if you could maybe explain that would be great.
I would love to. So I grew up in North County, mom and dad, and I had an older brother, younger sister. They were great role models, my parents. They were awesome, hardworking, really taught me a lot about, just how to be a good human being and how to be successful in life. So I feel very fortunate. We were a family that went camping a lot. We went on vacations together, and we had a big extended family in the area. So we always were around family. So I had a great childhood and feel very blessed. Growing up, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. So I always knew I wanted to be in a helping profession. That was just inherently felt like part of who I was. And then started off college and was in a pre-med program and realized, I guess, how much I wanted a family also. And I didn't think I could do both to the degree that I wanted to or that I would consider successful. So I learned about social work and medical social work specifically. So that felt like a great fit for me because it would allow me to help people in the healthcare setting, but it would also allow me to have the family that I wanted and to be there for them and to be the one raising my children. So that was the profession that I have ended up in and was a great fit, great decision for me.
That's fantastic. So where did you go to college to pursue this?
So undergraduate school, I went to Truman in Kirksville, and then I came back home and went to St. Louis University and got my master's in social work there.
Fantastic. So social work to me is a very broad category.
It is, yeah.
Within your degree choice, and you said medical, mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means to someone who has no background in social work?
Sure, yeah. So they have different categories basically of social work that you can study, and I chose to do a concentration in healthcare and learned that I could have gone a mental health route or more the medical side of things, and I chose to go the medical side of things. That was more where my interest lied and what I was drawn to. And so I really get to help in crisis intervention. So with the patients that I work with and their families, so I deal with substance abuse issues, mental health crisis, end-of-life care, and sometimes just basic things like helping to get a senior into an assisted living facility or a nursing home and making sure that people are safe when they leave the hospital.
Absolutely. Those are hard decisions for families to make.
Yes.
Having a grandma that traversed into that space, and it was a blessing, but it's a mental change for people to accept,
Yes.
okay, I'm approaching that end of life. So I commend you on that, because those are hard family decisions to make.
Yes.
And did you
Yeah.
gravitate toward any one of those in particular, or you really were pretty much spread across those that you just...
That's one of the things I love about my job is that it does vary day to day. And I do get to experience all of those things. I do particularly like those conversations of end of life, and helping with those transitions. I feel like that is just a very sacred place for an individual and for their family. And I want to be there to help them and support them and let them know that, they are making a loving decision, if they're transitioning to hospice. And so I want people to feel supported and comforted, and I feel like that's something I'm good at. So I do more gravitate towards that.
That's
part of my
wonderful.
role.
You
Yeah.
have to have a gentle heart for that, because I know it's just a tough conversation for
Yeah.
someone to realize, you know what, I need a different space. I need a
Yes.
different support system, that type of
Yeah.
a thing. So I
Yeah.
think that does take a very gentle heart and someone who is just open to understanding the complexities.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's a very noble profession from the standpoint of being courageous and compassionate. So I
Thank
commend
you.
you for that. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
wonderful. So how did that kind of bleed into your personal life? Understanding, your background and how things you understand, you're in tune with and understand some of the challenges that people go through.
Yeah. So my husband Corey was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and he also struggled with alcoholism. And so, a lot of what I was doing professionally then became a part of my life personally. And, it's one thing to talk about it with other people, and it's a whole different thing when you're experiencing it within your own household. So it did help prepare me in some ways, but I don't know that you can fully prepare yourself to have a loved one that struggles with those issues. Yes, I was aware of the resources and I knew how to get him the help that he needed, but there were definitely times where I struggled, and it was hard. It was hard for both of us to cope with, especially having 3 children and trying to navigate that. There were times where it wasn't always easy, and unfortunately, when you're dealing with somebody who has addiction or has mental health issues, sometimes there are disappointments, and sometimes there are just tough things that you have to deal with that you wish you didn't. But but that was part of our life. But I was committed to him and wanted always to try to give him every opportunity to get the care and the treatment that he needed, and hopefully for him to just thrive. That's always what I wanted for him.
So take us all back in time. So you met Corey in high school?
So we actually met in 5th grade.
Oh, wow.
And we were friends through middle school and high school. And he liked me, wanted more. I just wanted him to be a friend for a long time. And then, I don't know, there was just a little switch that went off, and I started looking at him differently. And so our senior year of high school, we became a couple, an unlikely couple. He was like the class clown, the goofball, very smart, but didn't apply himself in high school. And I was the studious one and in student council and involved in all of the activities. And so we were very much opposite, but we brought out the best in each other and pushed each other, I think, to just be better people.
So it was high school, senior year.
Yes.
And then when you both graduated, what happened at that point?
So we both went to different colleges, and so we had a long-distance relationship for a little bit, not that far. We were both still in the state of Missouri. And then he decided, he was very close to graduating college, did not quite finish. He decided he needed some more structure in his life, and he made the decision to join the Marine Corps. didn't really talk to anyone about it. He said because he was afraid people would try to talk him out of it. But he recognized that he needed to get out of Missouri and to have more structure in his life. And so he joined the Marine Corps.
Wow.
And I was still here finishing school, and eventually then we got married, and then I was with him for a while he was in the Marine Corps.
So what was your reaction to him? Like, hey, I'm going to join the
Oh
Marine Corps.
my gosh, I was shocked. Number one, I didn't, because he had never talked about it, but I completely understood his reasoning. And once we talked about it, I realized how necessary it was for him, and knew that it would be a good thing. If he could make it through boot camp, like, I knew he would be successful, and that it would be a good thing for him.
That's wonderful. So he was in the Marine Corps for how many years?
So he was active duty just for 4 years.
Okay. Which, that's a long time.
Yeah.
And so during that time, you got married and had children in that time?
We did not have
You did not
children.
have okay.
So he wanted to stay in the Marine Corps. I wanted to come back home when we were ready to have children. So he reluctantly came back to Missouri with me. He really wanted to stay in, but once we were ready to have children, I wanted to come back home and be close to family, because I had such a close connection to my family. I wanted to raise my kids around their grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins, because that's how I grew up, and I loved having that life, and I wanted that for our kids also.
Absolutely. I completely appreciate that. And selfishly, as the mom of 3 boys, I want them to be close. You just naturally want them to be close. Although you would support if they wanted to do something else. But in the back of my mind, I'm always like, stay close.
Yeah.
Because you want to see them succeed. You want to raise your grandchildren and be with their grandchildren and babysit and help. And so I completely understand that.
Yeah.
So that was, how old were you guys at that point?
So we were, I believe, 28 when we moved back to Missouri.
So that's later in life. Like you gave yourselves an opportunity to figure out who you were as individuals.
Yes,
it sounds
definitely.
like. And you took your time. Like a lot of people, especially when I'm assuming, you met each other young, you were high school sweethearts type of a situation. I feel like they immediately jump into, let's get married, have kids.
Yeah.
That's very common from what I've seen. So you did give yourselves time.
We did, yeah, and I knew I wanted to go to school and finish my schooling. I was afraid if I didn't, I would put it off and not do it. So It was important for me to finish school and start my career before we got married, and that's what we ended up doing, or what I ended up doing.
That's great. So then you were back. You got together, decided it was time to have a family. So tell me about that part of your life, the children.
Yeah. So. I tell my oldest son this, I will never forget the day he was born. I remember watching Corey. I remember seeing the birth of our son take his breath away, literally take his breath away. And Corey was an amazing dad, and he loved our kids. And so then our second child was a little girl, so he got his little girl, and they are a lot like each other. And they were just 2 peas in a pod. And then our youngest son was, we weren't sure if we were going to have a third child. And then it's like, you have this child and you can't imagine your life without this person. He brought Mason, our youngest, so much joy to all of us, even the older 2 kids. He was just such a fun and happy little boy. And Corey was the fun dad. So he did art projects with our kids and played music and danced with them and did like the crazy, silly stuff like dry ice in the kitchen sink to make it smoke, and just anything that they wanted to do or could come up with, he was right there with them. He was like a big kid at times, and our kids were so lucky to have him for the time that they did.
And I can see that personality coming through in some of the pictures you shared with me.
Yeah.
He lived life fully. I could see it in his expressions and the fun, that is conveyed in pictures.
Yes.
Even when you don't know someone, you can sense that lust for life and happiness.
Yes.
So I appreciated seeing all of that.
Yeah.
And, being a parent and getting down to that, enjoying the kids and really getting down and understanding how much fun you can have with them.
Yes.
It brings out the kid in you,
Yes,
you know, and
definitely.
it's the best thing in life as a parent. I feel like it's just, it really grounds you as an individual and
Yes.
makes you see the world through in a certain perspective and kind of get you back to the good things in life, you know, because as you get older, life gets tough. I mean, it just does. So throughout that process, you're having children, you're married, you guys have your careers. When did you start noticing that Corey was challenged, like he was having a hard time with himself as an individual?
Yeah, it was probably about 8 years into our marriage. And, you know, I knew that he was really struggling. And he finally, after, you know, some different challenges in our lives, he decided to see a psychiatrist. And so he was diagnosed in 2011 with bipolar disorder. And he started taking medication at that time and started getting psychiatric care and counseling. And he did do well for a while. And, you know, he really was committed to, you know, trying to stay healthy and take care of himself. And, you know, I know that he really wanted to be well for me and for our kids and to be around for as long as he could. And probably around 2017, I would say, is when he really started struggling. He had an inpatient psychiatric hospital stay at that time. And unfortunately, our kids saw he was putting himself kind of in a dangerous situation, and I ended up having to call the police, and they had to come get him and take him to the hospital. And so after that, he had told our kids, "I promise I'm never going to do anything like that again." And I know in his heart he believed that and wanted that to be true. And then in 2019, he really started struggling again. So he kind of stabilized. He found a psychiatrist that he really had liked and seemed like his medications were good. And then in 2019, the psychiatrist that he was seeing no longer took our insurance, and so he had to switch to a different psychiatrist. And that psychiatrist kept canceling appointments on him. And I saw his mental health deteriorate. And he was started on a new medication shortly before he died. And, you know, I think that really contributed to him kind of feeling the way that he did towards the end of his life.
Mm-hmm. And how were you managing your emotions and the children? I mean, that's a lot to handle on a day-to-day basis that I think people don't understand. Like, how are you managing this as as a human being?
Right. So I think initially my reaction was just because I am, I'm a fixer, I'm a caregiver, and so at first I thought I need to manage all of this. I need to take care of it, and it almost made me feel like I was the one that was sick. So I would count to see, did he take all of his medication, and, you know, just following up about his appointments. And then I realized the best thing I could do for him and for me was to let go. It was a perceived sense of control. I had no control over what he was doing or anything in our life, really, even though I wanted to believe that. So I decided to let go a little bit. And really, quite honestly, our marriage, our relationship improved after that because I just tried to be his wife and support him and love him the best way that I could and not try to control or fix or take care. I just, tried to support him and be there and listen to him. And our kids, we were honest with them about his mental illness and allowed them to ask questions if they had questions. And I tried to explain to them that his illness was like any other illness, and that there were times where he needed to see a doctor and he needed to take medication, and that there was nothing shameful about that. That those were just the things that he needed to do to stay healthy.
Yeah, and I'm sure, how were the kids? Did they ask questions? Were they just, they did ask
They
questions?
did ask questions, yeah. They wanted to know, they remembered the episode where he had, where the police came to our house and
Right.
he had to be taken away. And so they were curious and they did want to know. And, if they noticed something maybe a little off on his behavior, then they would just come to me and talk to
Yeah.
me about it and ask me. But overall, I feel like it wasn't something that was prevalent in their day-to-day life. They just knew their dad for the fun dad that he was. And we tried as much as we could to, Corey and I, to have conversations privately, and for his, day-to-day issues or appointments and things, those were things we talked about privately because we didn't want them to worry, constantly worry about him.
I completely understand that. You want them to understand what's going on, but they don't need to be in the details, so to speak, because you want to help to solve it as adults, and then just make sure that they feel that you're moving through it, you're comforted, comforting them, because it's hard, when you're dealing with big adult problems, trying to explain that to younger children. It's like they have no concept.
Right.
Not quite yet. And I think that it sounds like you had like really all the tools in place to help someone through this, knowing your background, knowing that you all were moving through therapy, and the acknowledgement that it's, number one, a problem, and number two, there's no shame behind it. And I think that that's something that can only help a situation.
Yeah. Yes.
So, that's incredible that you were able to get to that place as a family.
Yes.
And I think that was always your goal, having everyone together, your family, obviously from your upbringing, everyone communicated, you were part of, the big welcoming family.
Yeah. And my immediate family, Corey's immediate family, they knew the struggles that he was having, and they were there to support us in any way that they could. Corey was somewhat private about who he shared his mental illness with, but what I found out later was that anyone who had similar struggles with, he connected with, and he would contact them and check in on them on a regular basis. Several people reached out to me to tell me that, and I don't know really how he had the time or the energy to do that. But he did, and he wanted to help other people feel less alone, less judged if they had a mental illness or if they were struggling.
That's pretty incredible.
On their own, yeah.
And so throughout this entire process, were you ever able to kind of tie it back to anything that would have caused this? Was it anything to do in his childhood? Was it something that just was part of his chemistry? I mean, I'm sure you've asked yourself that question, like why is he struggling? Why I don't know that much about being bipolar or the concept of bipolar. I understand it in general, but I don't know if it stems from something, if you're born with it, those types of things.
Yeah, I think it's in a lot of cases, it seems like a combination of both. So he lost his father when he was very young. He did have some chemical dependency issues, and I think part of it is just biological. I really do. I don't think his brain operated the same as mine or a lot of other people. I think with bipolar disorder, there are extreme highs and extreme lows, and I know that there was conversation in his head that told him he was not good enough, and that we would be better off without him. And he would verbalize those things to me. And so I think because of, some of the ways that he had hurt me or hurt the kids or disappointed us, he really genuinely believed that we would be better off without him. Mm-hmm. And I think that was something that went through his mind daily. Wow. And, after losing him, I felt some anxiety, some depression. I didn't necessarily feel like I wanted to die, but I didn't feel like I wanted to live. And just experiencing that for that short amount of time and knowing that eventually, or praying and hoping that eventually that would get better, it was still hard to get up every day and face that. And he faced that every day. And he fought for as long as he could. I believe a lot for us. And so I've told you this before. I'm proud of him for the fight that he gave. And I know he did it a lot for me and for our kids and for, our other family members and friends. And I have no shame in the life that he lived or the way that he died. And I'm very proud of him, and I continue to be proud of him to this day. And I want my kids to know that and feel that also.
Which I think is incredible, because I've spoken with many people about the stigma that comes with suicide.
Yeah.
And the way you explained it is in the little glimpse into maybe how he was feeling on a daily basis, that he was literally fighting on a daily basis to make it through those emotions. Whereas you felt like, I don't even want to get out of bed. And he's dealing with this every day.
Yes.
And the fact that you feel like he was probably fighting against those voices in his head, like constantly, like my life would be better or their lives would be better without me in it. That's incredible. Like, you understand how strong those emotions are, is all I'm trying to say.
Yes.
And he really fought hard for you and the kids. He knew he was loved. He knew he was supported. But he still could not overcome whatever was driving that emotion in him.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're proud of him.
Yes.
Like, that to me speaks volumes. Because I think a lot of people that I speak with, they are so, they're hurt by the stigma that comes with when someone passes away from suicide, because people view it as they're working in control. It wasn't dealt to them. They dealt it onto themselves type of a situation. And I don't think we know enough about mental health and the strength it has in making those decisions.
Yeah.
And I feel like we don't have the resources. I hear about mental health constantly right now.
Yeah.
That's all you hear about is like, oh, you pay attention and be aware of. But I don't understand how to fix that, or how, not fix it, but how to approach that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love what you have to say, and I think that speaks volumes to people that are probably suffering in silence.
Yeah.
I heard that from another mom that we spoke to whose son committed suicide, and the stigma's there, and it's terrible because you're going through so much pain, and you need support. You don't need people saying, "Oh, well, they chose that route."
Right. Or they were weak, or whatever the case may be. Yeah. And even within my widow's group that I'm a part of, sometimes, I wonder, and this is just me, and I think it's because of some of the stigma surrounding suicide. I think, do they look at me and think, well, your husband chose to die. My husband had no choice. And so that's something that I'm trying to work on myself, because that is part of the stigma. And I don't want to think like that. I don't want my kids to think like that. He did not make a choice to leave us. He loved us beyond measure and wanted to be here with us. I think most of us are fortunate that we have a healthy brain, and we can't wrap our heads around the thought of wanting to end our life. And if you are that person, you are so fortunate, because I think people with a mental illness, they don't have that. Their brain, I believe, works differently, and they do a lot of times have that negative talk, and they do fight for as long as they can, I think, until they can't take that pain anymore.
And I can only imagine, because that's such a strong emotion. Like, I can't relate, because I have a healthy brain, as you're saying it.
Yeah.
And to feel like you're in that place where you don't want to continue on. I mean, that you're in a different place that people can't relate to.
Yeah.
And I feel like you did everything you possibly could to help, get him through that phase, and the kids were there. And, was there anything leading up to that particular day that you recognized where he was going that direction? Is there anything there any triggers, anything that, you know, you maybe would advise people to pay attention to that could help them moving forward?
Yeah, there definitely were events leading up to that day. So a few days before he died, he had drank, and he drank in front of our kids, which he had not done. And so they saw him in that state, and he was very ashamed of himself and very disappointed in himself. And he knew that he had promised them 2 years prior that he wasn't going to do anything like that again. And so, you know, he had the shame of that. And he decided, you know, we had a conversation about it. He felt like he needed some more intense help. And so he felt like he was causing stress to me and the kids. And he felt like it would be better if he went and stayed somewhere for a few days to kind of give us a break and some time just with the kids and I. And so he decided to go stay at my mom and dad's house. They were out of town for the weekend. And, you know, that day before he had left to go there, it was a normal day. We went grocery shopping. His car, he got new tires on his car. Nothing that would have indicated to me that he was planning to end his life. At that time, he was working on a project. He was actually filming a documentary with a friend. They went and did some filming that day, and I took him to get his car, and we said goodbye in the parking lot, and I gave him a hug and a kiss, and I told him, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this together. And he went to my parents' house, and I had talked with him throughout the night, and he didn't have a cell phone charger with him. And I found out later that he had been calling all kinds of people and talking to people throughout the night. Towards the end of the night, I talked to him, and he said, you know, my phone's about to die. I was getting the kids ready for bed. I said, I'll call you back on my mom and dad's on their landline. And so I tried calling his cell phone, and he didn't answer. I tried calling my mom and dad's phone, and he didn't answer. And I just assumed he was tired and had gone to bed. And the next morning, I woke up and I found a letter that he had written to our kids. And it was not a suicide note. It just said to the kids that he felt like he needed to leave, and he needed to get more help. And he asked them to be good to me, and just told them how much he loved them. And my heart sank. But your mind always, you know, just doesn't want to believe that something terrible like that could happen. So I grabbed a phone charger when I left the house, because I thought, oh, he's going to need this for the rest of the weekend. And when I got to my parents' house, I saw that his suitcase was still sitting there. He hadn't unpacked anything. That's when I found him, and he had hung himself at my parents' house. And, you know, I still, even though he struggled with mental illness, it was still such a shock to me that he could have actually done that. And so I think, you know, a lot of times you want to go back in time, and you want to try to figure out, what could I have done differently? I don't know. I don't know that there was anything that I could have done differently. I realize now that he was obviously struggling, and the shame was greater than I thought. But I think it's just really talking to someone. I think if his phone hadn't died and he could have kept talking, that was his lifeline. And I think if that hadn't have happened, he might have made it through the darkness of that night.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that story. It's a difficult conversation, and our sincerest condolences for the pain that you've gone through and continue to go through. I mean, these are things you don't get over. This is something that will be with you and your children for the rest of their lives. And I think what is helpful for listeners is to hear how you managed dealing through this after it happened. How did you take this information and share it with the family and try to move forward?
Yeah. So, initially, I was literally brought to my knees. And I remember just screaming, no. And I sat there for a minute, and then I don't even know what it was, but something in me just said, you've got to deal with this. You've got to face this. And I remember calling my parents because they were out of town. I don't even remember the last time I said mommy, but I remember saying, Mommy, he's gone. And because my parents knew his struggles, they knew exactly what I meant by that. I remember, the police getting there, and I remember them saying, I'm sure you have lots of questions. There's always lots of questions when you lose someone to suicide. And I said, I don't know if this is fortunate or not, but I understood him, and I knew him, and I knew his struggle, and I understand why he did what he did. And I had so many little angels with me that day. My brother immediately came to the house. They wouldn't even let him in. He waited outside for me. My sister went and picked up my oldest son, who was at a football game, and my sister-in-law went to go be with the younger two kids, and I had asked both of them not to tell the kids that I needed to be the one to tell them and be there when they found out. And all of them loved Corey like their own. And so to think about them having to do that, and they successfully did, and my kids didn't know, is incredible that they were all able to do that for me. And after I was done with the police at my parents' house, then I was able to go home and tell my kids. And I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to be honest with them about how he died. And so I told them that their dad had died and that he had taken his life. And the four of us just hugged each other and cried. And the rest of our family was there to support us through that. And we were blessed with a community that really rallied around us and helped us. And that's how we got through that initial first few days, few weeks. And then, everybody, and you've heard this before, I'm sure, everybody kind of goes away. There are some people that are still there, but for the most part, you're on your own and you are trying to figure that out. And I really started simple. I remember someone telling me, just breathe. And I realized that I was living so tense and I was holding my breath, and that was just making it harder. And so I started by just focusing on breathing. And as simple as it sounds, it was necessary. And then my kids had to go back to school. So we started with that, just getting back into a routine. I had a dog that really helped save me during that time, because I could go. It was cold. It was November, and I needed to just get outside. And so I would take the dog for walks, and I could just cry. So I was away from the kids. I never hid emotion from them, but I tried, just tried to have time where I could cry and I could release the sadness that I was feeling. And probably about a month after Corey died, I had a friend tell me about a widow's support group. And I started going to that. And I met 3 women who, I met Destiny, and her husband's name was Corey, spelled the same as my Corey. And I met Lisa, who had also lost her husband to suicide. And I met Cindy, who had been married for 16 and a half years, like Corey and I. And those just 3 simple little connections made me feel like I was in the place that I needed to be. And they were a little bit further out in their journey, and they were smiling, and they were able to reach back and help other people. And it just gave me the glimmer of hope that I needed, that someday I could get to where they are, and maybe even someday I could help someone else. Because part of my grief, one of the hardest things, was that I did not have the capacity to help other people. And I had always been a helper. And so for me, that was so hard to recognize and acknowledge I don't have the capacity to help anyone else. I am surviving. I'm doing what I can to get through the day and to get my kids through these difficult days. And I had nothing else to give at that time. But they gave me hope that maybe someday it would be different.
What a blessing, seriously,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
coming from a social work background, you're always giving of yourself.
Yeah.
And the fact that you realize I can't do this right now. Like
Yeah.
there's so much going on in my life for myself and my kids. I need to just step back and
Yes.
take on the help.
Yes.
And I love that you found a group. How did you find them? Did you say you found them a certain way?
So actually a friend from high school had lost her husband a few months prior to me, and she hadn't gone to a meeting yet. And so she told me about the group, and we went to the meeting together. So that's how I found out about it.
Okay, wonderful. And obviously we know Destiny, and
Yeah.
she was the one that actually recommended we speak with you. And I think that's wonderful that you are all trying to lift each other up,
Yes.
no matter what the cause. It sounds
Yeah.
like a great group of women, and it is just women right now.
It is, yes.
And it's called St. Louis Crew.
Yes.
And that stands for, tell me what the crew stands for.
Connect, recreate, and empower widows.
That's wonderful. And so one thing she spoke about was, widows aren't always, 80-year-old women. And there are a lot of stories, and not that there's anything wrong with that. Everyone
Right.
needs support,
Right.
but for maybe younger women who need that connection, they've
Yes.
had a circumstance, whether it's suicide, anything,
Yes.
any reason you're in a widow, being a widow, it's an opportunity to connect.
Yes.
And you get together, like, is it monthly?
We do. We meet monthly on the second Sunday of the month, and we have lunch, and we usually have a topic that we discuss, and then just time for women to connect and talk to each other. And then we try to have social events. This weekend, we're actually having a full weekend retreat for the women to just get a break and to connect with nature and have time to journal and spend time with other women who understand the struggle that they're going through.
And so you're one of 4 of
Yes.
these women that have kind of started this
Yes.
group. And so you're obviously we're dealing with pain, and it will never end. There's raw emotion that will never go away.
Yes.
But you have turned some corner where you feel like you can share your story, what you're doing today, and through other means, where you can give them them meaning other females in a
Yes.
similar situation,
Yeah.
guidance. So
Yes.
that has to feel, I would assume, somewhat cathartic in the sense that you're in a spot right now that you
Yes.
feel like you're working through your healing process.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think, when you have been together with someone for so long, and then you have this sudden loss that really impacts almost every area of your life, you don't feel like yourself. You feel so lost. And becoming a part of this group and then being able to reach back and help other widows helped me feel more like myself again. And that has been so powerful. And knowing that I am giving other women the hope that Cindy and Destiny and Lisa gave me is such a good feeling. And it feels like I am giving purpose to the loss that I experienced. And so it's so helpful, and I'm so glad that I have reached a point where I felt capable that I had that to give.
That's wonderful. And how are your kids doing?
They're doing well. So they are typical teenagers, and I'm so glad that they are. What I've learned through this process is that everybody grieves differently, and I think especially adolescents. And so they are at a point now where they're starting to talk a little bit more about their dad. I think for a while it was easier for them not to talk about it. And I don't think they talk a lot to their friends about it yet, but they're starting to talk to me more about their dad and memories and willing to look at pictures. And so they're happy and they're healthy. And, I couldn't ask for more from them, and they're just normal, typical teenagers. So I didn't want to place any more responsibility on them just because their dad wasn't there. I still wanted them to be able to live life as normally as possible. And I think they have been able to do that. And I'm really proud of them. And I think they're going to be just great human beings. And I think this loss is going to give them empathy and understanding that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
I bet you're an amazing social worker, because I can just tell that you have that whole vantage point of making sure that they're empathetic and that you want them to be able to communicate, but you don't want them to carry it throughout their life as something that's going to be negative for them.
Right.
You want them to be able to work through those emotions in a healthy manner. And I think that's the best thing a parent can ask for, because you don't want that to impact their lives in a negative way. I feel like that's a wonderful gift as someone who's been through it.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a struggle, and time
Yes.
helps, at least with children.
For sure.
You know, obviously, like we've just said, it's so raw, it's super emotional, and it's something that will never go away. And I think people have to respect that in your grieving process, so you will never get over it. And that's where so many people grieve differently, and no one will ever get over that sense of loss, because that person impacted your life. That person is part of you.
Right.
So I feel like that's a great message to send. You're working through all of this. Your kids are healthy. What are some of the ways that you remember Corey as a family? Like, do you have traditions or anything that you try to, I guess, bring back or center around? Maybe is it holidays? I'm not sure. Everybody has a different way of remembering someone.
Yeah. So we try to, on his birthday, to usually go out to eat and have a birthday cake. So I have tried more so to honor and remember his life and not center things so much around his death. So we have focused and put more attention on his birthday, because what a blessing he was to all of us while he was here. So I want to honor and celebrate his birth. We do, in September, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention does a walk, and so we do the walk every year. So whoever from friends and family that are available join us, and we walk in his honor. And Corey was extremely patriotic. So 4th of July especially, we remember him and honor his love and appreciation for our country. So he was a runner, and he used to, on patriotic holidays, run with this humongous flag. So I always think about him on days that honor our country, because that was so important to him.
That's wonderful. That's a great way to remember him. I think that's impactful, and hopefully something your children will carry on as they get older and keep that memory alive. Because I think that's so, obviously he's their father. They need to recognize maybe characteristics from him that they inherited. And, I'm sure those are certain things. Like your dad was like this.
Yes, I remind them. And my older 2 kids, my younger son doesn't really listen to music yet, but it just warms my heart when I hear they have great taste in music, and that came from their dad. And when I hear songs that he loved and I hear them listening to it, that feels good. And I love seeing his influence, in them as they continue to get older and come into their own.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you today for being with us. And I know you're going to bring so much hope to others who I feel like suffer in silence. And I talk about this a lot, but a lot of people just don't know how to handle their grief, and they don't understand what resources are necessarily out there. And I think just to hear what people have gone through and see that they are moving forward through the grief.
Yeah.
And that's a personal choice. You have to be able to kind of come out of that shell and take a step to maybe join a group or something. That's a big step in my opinion, because it is easier to stay insulated. But sometimes that's not the healthiest approach.
It's not. Yeah.
Talking with people like you who have been through these tragedies, and our whole goal is with these Life Beyond Loss episodes is to promote turning tragedy into purpose.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and you say that in your own words, you've been able to turn around and take your situation to help others.
Yes.
And I think that's just so valuable. So we appreciate your story, your emotion, and your ability to convey ways that people can move through this. So thanks for your time.
Of course.
Is there anything else that you would like us to cover today in our discussion?
Yeah, I would like to just a little bit touch on some of the resources that were beneficial to me and to my family. And also just want to point out the woman that is sitting here today is very different than the woman who lost her husband almost 5 years ago. So I think sometimes people will look at me and think, you're happy, and they don't understand the work that it took to get here. This loss was devastating to me. And there were resources and there were people and things that I did that helped get me to this point. One of them is a treatment modality called EMDR, and it helps with. So I had the image of finding Corey stuck in my head, and it was just. I would close my eyes and I would see that, and I did not want to remember him like that. So EMDR is a type of therapy that helps the brain process trauma. And so that was something that was very, very helpful to me, and I think could be helpful to other loss survivors. Another thing that, my kids told me immediately, Mom, I don't want to go to counseling. I'm not going to talk to a stranger. I'm not going to tell them how I'm feeling, and you would be wasting your money if you try to force us to go to a counselor. We'll just sit there and we won't say anything. But I wanted to do something. And so I found an organization called Arise, which is equine therapy. And because Corey was a veteran, they offered services to us at no cost. So the kids and I got to do that therapy together. So we worked with horses and we worked with a counselor, and it didn't feel like therapy. It was a chance for us to be outside, to be in nature, to be with animals, which we all love, and to have a counselor kind of help guiding discussions. So that was another resource that was really, really great for my family, and an alternative to traditional therapy. So for some people, that might be good, but I knew it wasn't going to work for my kids. Other things, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is also a great resource for someone who is struggling with mental health issues or suicidal ideation, and for those that have lost someone to suicide. So it's another organization that I think is just a tremendous help and a great resource for our community. And then also for somebody who is struggling with mental health, they now have mental health urgent cares in the area. So, or like an emergency room kind of for mental health crisis. So it's somewhere where somebody can go and get immediate help and connection to resources in the community. And so I think that's another great resource for people to know about if you are struggling with suicidal ideation or a mental health crisis.
That's amazing. I'd never heard of that before. So I definitely am learning. I've heard about the equine therapy. Like that seems like it's a very, people are enjoying that experience versus traditional methods of therapy. I can completely understand that, especially with kids. They're like, I don't want to get involved with a stranger. It's hard to open up, especially with something so serious. So that's great to hear that was positive for your family. But that the kind of urgent care for mental health crises, is interesting. So is that something that's fairly new?
It is fairly new. So I first, SSM at DePaul opened a location there. And then I think they've opened one at St. Clair maybe now, or in the Fenton area. So that is fairly new to where you can go somewhere strictly for the mental health services and, get medication if you need it, a referral to a psychiatrist, and they're going to try to get you into someone quicker because oftentimes if you call a psychiatrist's office, it may be several months before you can get an appointment. So this is going to get you in and prioritized to see somebody faster. So I think it's a great resource for our community, and I hope that it will help some of those circumstances where people otherwise wouldn't have access to help.
Absolutely. in these situations, you can't wait for an appointment. I mean,
Yes.
it's immediate. You
Yeah,
need help
it's life and
right
death
away. It's life and
sometimes.
death. You need help right away.
Yeah.
And those resources are so important, especially as we get further into understanding mental health as an issue. And the acceptance of it is important. So it's great to see that things are changing. And I feel like that will grow. I hope it will grow.
I think so too. Yeah.
So that's good to hear.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
So many resources.
I
can't believe
know.
it. I mean, I feel like you have a really good handle on ways for people to engage in one way or another for a family, an individual, or someone going through it themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just good to know those things because I think people struggle and they don't know what to do.
Right.
So it's super helpful.
Yeah. I think last thing, just, I think initially I thought I need to make a big change, a big impact, and what can I do to help prevent suicide? And I think sometimes other people often wonder, how do I help? How do I support someone who is struggling with a mental health crisis or with suicidal ideation? And I go back to the last night of Corey's life, and it really is as simple as talking to someone. And just being there and showing up for them. You have no idea, I don't think, until you talk to somebody who's been through something like that, how helpful that is to just know that somebody cares, that they're loved, that they want them to stay. And so really, if you can just be that person for someone, you can prevent suicide. It doesn't take a big act. It can be something as simple as just being there and talking through a crisis with someone.
And that's great to hear because that's very manageable.
Yeah,
It doesn't require some
Any
huge
one of us
action.
can do that.
Anyone can do it, and it's just having that open conversation with people like, I am here for you always, no matter the time of day.
Yes. Yeah.
No matter what circumstance, I'm always here for you. It's funny, my dad used to always say to me, no matter what you do, I will always love you. No matter what. Like, you can tell me anything. It's just knowing that you have that person that is in your life, that even if you rob a bank or you do something really stupid, someone is always there to help you in whatever way, shape, or form. It's just very critical to people, especially people struggling.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So looking forward, what are some of your goals, hopes, and dreams that you're striving toward?
So I think primarily it's really right now focused on my kids and getting them through high school and on to college. And then for our widows group, the STL Crew, just seeing that grow and providing the support that widows in our area need. So we're excited about raising funds so that we can help local widows and help them with immediate needs that come when you are widowed, and also trying to raise a family. So I'm excited to see where that group goes and the impact that we're going to make on this community. And of course, just day to day, I want to just help as many people as possible and be a support person. And I want people to know, whether you're my friend or family, or I've yet to meet you, that I am an advocate for mental health, and that I am here to help and guide you in any way that I can. That is my passion. Corey had that same passion, and I feel just a great responsibility to live a life big enough for both of us. And so that's my goal, to travel, to go on adventures, and to live a life as big and as happy as he was, to honor him and to fulfill my happiness and the joy that I feel now moving forward.
That's incredible. I wish you nothing but the best in
Thank
that
you.
endeavor. That's definitely a larger than life attitude. I mean, you've been dealt with something that's very difficult, and you have really turned that around to help not only yourself and your family, but others. I mean, that's a huge testament to who you are. So congratulations on getting to that point. I know it'll never be perfect, but that's a huge leap for someone that just had this happen within the past 5 years. So, I mean, that's a huge journey, and it's something that I feel like I hope others can aspire to. So that's why we're here today.
Too. Yeah.
Sharing your message. For those that are listening or watching today, what are some of the resources that you already mentioned? Where can they find those resources?
So STL Crew, we have a Facebook page, and there's just a few questions that you have to answer for us to accept you and become a part of that. And that Facebook page, that online support is great, especially if you're not quite ready to come to meetings and participate in that way. You can get support online through our Facebook page. The Arise Equine Therapy, you can look them up and, get information about them. And then the EMDR, if you can look for specific therapists in this area who are trained and certified to provide that type of therapy. So EMDR, it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So again, helps the brain reprocess trauma, any type of trauma that you may have experienced. So if you look for a therapist who specializes in that. So those are, I think, the main ones that I think would be helpful.
So what additional resources are available for kids that you found to be helpful?
So we are so fortunate in the St. Louis area to have an organization called Annie's Hope. And it is a grief organization that solely focuses on children's grief. And the loss can be the loss of anyone important to them. So it could be a parent, a grandparent, aunt, uncle, just anyone who was significant in their life. And they do support group sessions. So they'll do like 8-week sessions at a time. They'll pair kids up within their age group and do different activities with them to help them work through their grief. And then they also have camps available. So anyone who's participated in their program can come to the camps. And they are out in nature and they do, different activities outside. They also do art therapy and music therapy. And the wonderful thing is that they do not charge for their services. So if you have the ability to make a donation, they ask you to do that, but it is not required. So they work or they're able to provide these services based on grants and donations from the community. So it is a great resource. And again, if the child that is experiencing grief is not, someone wanting to sit down and talk with a counselor, it's a wonderful alternative for them and also for them to feel that peer support to be around other kids who have had a similar loss.
Awesome. Thank you. Those are all great resources. I learned a lot today about things I'd never heard of, and it's great to know that those are out there. You did also mention the mental health urgent care.
Yes.
Is that something that you just would recommend people look up?
If you actually go to ssmhealth.com, you can find information about those mental health resource centers that are available.
Gina, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your resources and steps toward healing. We believe it will help a lot of our listeners and viewers out there.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to Life Beyond Loss, a podcast from Survival in the Trenches. If you'd like to get involved and help those struggling to cope with personal loss, visit us at our website, survivalitt.com, and follow us on social media. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast so we can continue to grow and reach more people in need. Together, we can make a difference.